really very, very privileged to introduce and ask you to join me in welcoming Dan Nevins.
Okay, so do you remember the most ridiculous thing you've ever said?
Yeah, just a few minutes
ago.
Right,
yeah. Kara, who's that? No, for me, I mean, I really do. It was 5 years ago. It's the first time I stood in front of people and said that, hi, my name is Dan Nevins, and I'm a yoga teacher. Like, you got to get that. Like, for me, that's the furthest thing from my life that I ever thought I'd say. Like, when the words were coming out of my mouth, I'm like, who is this guy that's saying this? And I'm sure you've been like, if you went to college or high school, you've had moments like that. But for me, like, that's, it's funny, like I say now, it's the most ridiculous thing I've said, but it's actually the most important work I've ever done, which is going to sound a little bit weird after the story I'm about to tell you. You see, one of the reasons for me to say that teaching yoga or being a yoga teacher is weird is because I grew up in the ghetto in Baltimore. And for me, like, I don't even think yoga was a word I even identified or even heard. Like, I'm pretty sure I've never even heard of it growing up. You know, like where I'm from, it's like I'm similar to a lot of my friends in that I'm a product of a broken home. Except for me, it was a little bit role reverse. My mom left when I was 13. And then my dad did the best he could to raise my brother and I. So my brother was 3 years older than I am. So he's 16, I'm 13. My dad is, listen, I mean, he tried hard. Like, it's not like he was a bad father, but just parenting wasn't natural for him. He was a truck driver, so he was gone for weeks at a time. Actually, like, you know, he did the best he could. Before he'd leave for a couple weeks, you know, my brother's 16, I'm 13, he would fill the refrigerator up with food, like lunch meat and some Coke, or, you know, like not the best Doritos, yeah, not the best food in the world, but still food. And then he'd go, but like, you got to remember this, as soon as my dad was gone for 3 weeks, and my brother who's 16, as soon as my dad would like leave, like my brother would be on the phone calling all his friends, with phone with the cord plugged into the wall. And like they would all come over and they'd drink beer and smoke weed and then eat all the food. But the best gift I ever got from my dad was actually on my 13th birthday. It was before my mom had left, but I remember specifically, I woke up, I'm a December baby, December 22nd is my birthday. So school is out, but the office was open. So I remember for my 13th birthday, I woke up to the present that there would be no more presents. And that my present was, we'd walk to the high school. I lived in a dangerous neighborhood, so it was a pretty, you know, like not a fun walk to, it was Christmas time, so it was cool. And I got a work permit. And then that night, I had my first job washing dishes at the Burnbrae Dinner Theater in Glen Burnie, Maryland. And I haven't been unemployed for a single day since. And so like that, you know, my dad taught me that work ethic, and I'm actually really thankful because if it wasn't for me actually having a job, I wouldn't have been able to eat or to buy clothes that I could wear that the other people like in school wouldn't know how poor I was. So like, I'm like actually appreciative for that lesson that he taught me, but he was, you know, he was gone a lot. And like most people like in those situations, the TV was my babysitter. You know, I grew up watching all the family shows. Remember that time, you know, so I'm 45 now, so we're talking late 70s, 80s, like watching all those, and it was so popular. The Leave It to Beaver reruns, Little House on the Prairie, like all these wholesome family shows, Family Ties, Brady Bunch, like all those, right? And the Cosby Show. Turned out Bill Cosby wasn't so great. But Cliff Huxtable nailed it as a dad, right? The wisdom and best advice. You know, but I never really, like I watched shows because everyone else did, but I never really got the warm and fuzzies because that was nothing like my family. None of that. Matter of fact, it was when I was, you know, I did my junior year twice because I was so good at it the first time. You know, like I remember what had happened in the summer between my second junior year and senior year was we were posturing for war as a country. Some of you may not remember, I know some of you do. It was the first Gulf War. Operation Desert Shield was ramping up. And so, you know, I remember watching, it must have been a local unit being deployed. And we've all seen this a million times at this point. It's that farewell ceremony when a unit's about to be deployed and they're hugging their loved ones and saying goodbye. You know, you've seen those things, yeah? And it like pulls at your heartstrings. There's men and women in uniform saying goodbye to their families, their children. There's tears, and like awkward smiles and long embraces. And I remember like watching this unfold. And, you know, I'd like to say that it was pulling on my heartstrings, but like that version of me, like that 17-year-old version of me, I didn't have any heartstrings. Like, I mean, I was rough. Like I grew up, everybody seen The Wire? Yeah, like that, I grew up in The Wire. Like there, drug gangs and violence, and it was like, I had to be the funny kid to get to school without being like abused, tortured, maybe killed, maybe not, probably not, but like, you know, the fear as a child is there, I'm gonna get killed. And so, you know, like I didn't really get the warm and fuzzies from that. It just was like I was a hard punk kid. But then I saw something in that same scenario that really changed things for me. What I saw was a group of those people in uniform saying goodbye to their families, and the tears and the thing that really gets you now, or that would still get me now as a dad, having my own family. But this, what happened next that got me. It was those group of people in uniform that left their families and they came together. And they started embracing each other. And there were more tears and awkward smiles and long embraces. And I had this like aha moment. It's like, well, that's a family that I could choose, that I could actually be part of. Like I can choose that one. So I remember racing down to my recruiting depot. The next school year was about to start. And I remember going through I took the ASVAB test, took all the tests, did everything. So my recruiter lied to me all day. Didn't know any difference. He's telling me all the things I could be and do. I'm like, oh, I'm so excited. And you scored really high. And I'm like, ah. And then, so I raised my right hand and I joined the delayed entry program. And I was like, okay, wait, what's the delay? He's like, oh, you have to graduate high school first. I was like, oh, I didn't know if that was going to happen. And I remember going to my guidance counselor. I had this half of an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. The counselor had to sign it and say that I was going to graduate on time so they can give me a date to go to basic training. And I remember going to my guidance counselor's office and meeting with her. And I didn't even know where the guidance counselor's office was or who she was. And I'm sitting with her and she like looks and gets my file and I remember like she's sitting at her desk and looking at it. Oh, honey. Yeah, you're not going to graduate with your class. And I was like, well, wait, you don't understand. Like, we're supposed to be at war. Like, these things are going to happen. Like, no, like, I have to go. And for me, like, it was, I needed to escape where I was growing up, how I was growing up. Like, I knew, like, I don't know what it was, but I knew I needed to be out of there. And then I wrapped that around patriotism, serving the country, it was true, actually. But the real reason was I just wanted to get out of where I was. And so it was urgent for me. And I remember she like saw that, maybe the desperation. And she made one phone call and she was flipping through some more things. And she's like, okay, look, you can do a full day of day school, take all your classes, 3 nights a week of night school, and Saturday morning school. And if you do all that and pass all your classes, you can graduate with your class. And I sucked at regular school. Like, I didn't know if I could do it, right? I mean, I had a job, a girlfriend, like the important things. School was just something that I felt like I was supposed to do because I kind of had to. But now I actually had to. And it was the first goal I've ever had. My whole life was graduate high school, take all these extra classes. And then I did. And I graduated on time, and 3 days later, I was off in basic training. It was like first goal I ever had, I also achieved with a lot of hard work. But the part I'm leaving out is the fact that the Gulf War, if you remember, Desert Storm started in February of 1991. I'm a senior in high school, and it was over in March of 1991. And I was like, still had some meat on the bone in my school year. I'm like, do I still have to go? Like, you know, I joined a fight, and now there was no fight to go to. But obviously, I wouldn't have changed a thing, and I still went in, and I loved my time in the military. Like, I got to be that poor kid from Baltimore that changed up. I didn't learn I had an accent, which I hopefully is shed by now, but I had the whole Baltimore thing, like drink water. Drink what? Water. You mean water? That's what I said. No, it's not what you said. Like a whole, like, you know, I learned about different cultures and met different people and kind of did my training, and then went to airborne school, learned how to jump out of airplanes, and did all that. And went to my first duty station was in Germany. Spent 4 years in Germany, got to travel all over the world. It's this poor kid from the ghetto of Baltimore, got to see life and meet other people and learn how to speak German and learned about other cultures and people and got to experience more. And I was actually like living a life I actually really liked. Like the poor kid from Baltimore sort of made good a little bit. And I got to wear a uniform that meant something to me. Like I actually became a man wearing the uniform of our country. I learned values for the first time, like for the first time ever, about loyalty, courage, integrity, about honor, commitment, about being part of something bigger than me. Because where I grew up, you just had to take care of yourself. That's it. You know, and like I grew up in the time when people had Nintendo. Like it was just like, we went from Atari to Nintendo. Nintendo was the hot stuff, playing Super Mario Brothers. Like that was, but we couldn't afford that. So we used to play what we called war, and we'd get sticks and run around and like shoot each other. Like, I got you, no you didn't. Like that whole thing in the woods. And like in that situation, you had to fist fight to be the leader. And I was the little kid, so I never got to be the leader. But now I got to earn the title of leader, wearing the uniform of my country. And I just, something I'll never forget, but I'm just so grateful for all the opportunity that just got me to that spot. And it was like I was still living below the poverty line, you know, as a lower enlisted person in the military, but I had a purpose. And I felt good about that. And then after 4 years in the Army, I decided that I wanted to maybe make it a career. So I enlisted for 4 more. And now back from Germany to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Best place in the world to be a soldier. Like literally, I got to jump out of airplanes, shoot every weapon system known to man, blow things up. Like playing war, like I got to do it in real life. Yeah, it was a peacetime army, but I got to go and train Germans and get German jump rings and go train with the Russians and go train, like, because we were finally getting along after the Cold War. Like that was cool, because when I was in basic training, we were like, kill the commies. And now I don't know what they say in basic training, but it's just different. Like it was a whole learning experience about the globe and life and our place in the universe and all that. And the world was opening up, and it was just such a great time and place to be, the best place in the world to be a soldier. I mean, you look up soldier in the dictionary, and there's a guy from Fort Bragg, looks like Fabio with short hair, just like, like he uses a weapon, just like all those things, right? You've seen the thing, right? Like the commercial, like in the video games, the helmets just right, like that. Fort Bragg, I got to be one of like those guys. Worst place in the world to be a single dude, though. 18 men to every woman in the Fayetteville, North Carolina general area. Any single women in here? Yeah, go to Fort Bragg. just going. Look, you, I like you. Anyone you want, right? It's just, it's like that, actually. It's so true. Sorry, you just lost an employee. I'm just, no, it was, but like, I loved every minute I spent in uniform, and I got to not only like be a soldier, but I got to lead other soldiers. And I get to learn more about myself than I ever thought I would. But then ultimately I decided to leave active duty because there was no war to fight. And I went on to be the first person in my family to graduate college. My first job, I was a senior in college at Sonoma State University in California. And I got a job as a stockbroker during my last semester of my senior year. And I remember, like, I loved it. And like, for the market opens at 9:30 here on the East Coast, but it's 6:30 a.m. on the West Coast. I remember getting in at 6 and opening in the office. One morning on September 11th, 2001. Turned on the news like we do every day. Sat down in my office, and just like the rest of the world watched as the second plane crashed into the World Trade Center. And I just remember being riveted to the television, like all of us were that remember, just watching the horrible things unfold, and I'm hearing about terrorism, Osama bin Laden, all these names I'd never heard before, and all these things I'd never heard before, and I'm just glued and riveted. And you ever get that feeling that someone's like staring at you, somebody's watching you? And that kind of creeped out feeling? Well, I turned and my boss, Bob, was staring at me, and his face was white as a ghost. And like, he was like, this panic in his face. I was like, Bob, is everything okay? He's like, you're still in the Army. You see, I had simultaneously re-enlisted from the active duty into the California Army National Guard. And see, the National Guard was much different than active duty. Like, it went from Fabio to like not Fabio. Like, no, like, you know, went from like the epitome of what it was like to be a soldier, 4-hour recall to anywhere in the world, like tip of the spear, no matter where, no matter what time of the day or night, you were ready to go, to people that have been in for like 30 plus years, just riding out till they can retire when they're 62 or whatever time it was. And the Guard was different. Like, it functioned different than the active duty. And we had people with like bushy gray hair that came all down out of regulations, and mustaches that hung over their face, and their uniform, like, didn't button. Like, there wasn't enough material. And like, it's not bad and not body shaming, but it's just not part of the military standard. It's not what I was used to. It's just like, I was like, whoa, like, well, these people, this is not the same thing. And I was in the training room. I was a training NCO. So I had looked at training records. People hadn't shot their weapon in more than 6 years. They hadn't taken a physical fitness test in even longer than that. Like, these people were not like fit to fight, but they were good people, right? And that was fine. So I remember when Bob said to me, he was like, you're still in the Army. Do you think you'll have to go to war? And it's the first time, even watching all that I've even considered it. I was so like focused on school and life, I didn't even put 2 and 2 together. And I paused, and then I got this smile on my face. I said, no, I'm not going to be deployed. Not with these people. Like, no, that would be like unconscionable to send us off into combat. Like, no, not going to happen. And I was right for a couple more years. And then we got our orders to be deployed to Iraq for Operation Iraqi Freedom 2, which was supposed to be for 6 months. But on the day we got deployed, getting my orders, it said, Staff Sergeant Nevins, you're being ordered to support of Operation Iraqi Freedom 2 for a period of no less than 545 days. Now, I wasn't a math major, but that's a lot more than 6 months. And I remember, see, I was married at the time, newly married. My wife was an Army brat, grew up the son of a Vietnam veteran. I grew up the daughter of a Vietnam veteran who used alcohol and rage to combat his demons. So she wouldn't have married a guy in the military. So the fact that I was in the National Guard, like that was okay because it wasn't the same thing. And then when I told her I was being deployed, I remember being met with, wait, I thought this wasn't supposed to happen. Like I thought this was different. If I would have known this was possible, I never would have married you. Now, I know she was speaking from hurt. And she probably, to this day, probably wouldn't remember saying it, but she did. So it was a lot of tension in those months leading up to deployment. And then I remember handing her those orders, and she looked at them. Order's just a piece of paper with all these words that tells you things on it. And she like, what is this? And I remember pointing to that 545 days. And I remember her balling that paper up in her hands, and she just hit her knees in front of our 10-year-old daughter. And then I just picked up my gear and left. 2 weeks at the National Training Center in California to train up for this new type of combat operations we were going to do. Then another 6 weeks in Kuwait, staging to go to Iraq. And meanwhile, like, it's not like, it took one of our whole battalion of 700 people. It took basically 1 in 7. So it took our whole battalion to make one deployable company. And of those that made the standard to be deployed, I mean, they were kind of faking the paperwork on some of it, to be honest. So like I always say that it looked like the Beverly Hillbillies rolling the combat. And I don't mean it to be judgmental. It's just really what it looked like. We had these old woodland camouflage vehicles with no armor, and we have old weapons that are all outdated, and we like look ridiculous. And some of the guys' uniforms don't fit right, and some of their like ballistic vests are like up high over their belt. Like it wasn't like Fabio. It was a completely different picture. We had to put sandbags on the floor, and we took pieces of scrap metal to weld it to the outside of our vehicle just to try to keep ourselves safe. And I remember we were still unclear on what our mission was going to be. But then it turned out we were going to be headed to this place called Balad, Iraq, to LSA in Anaconda, which is the largest base in Iraq. It was a logistical hub for the theater. Everything would go in, get divvied up, go out on convoys to different forward operating bases. And then we finally learned halfway to Balad that we were going to be responsible for, with 81st Brigade Combat Team, for the physical security of the base, meaning working in the guard towers and the entry control point, people would call the gates, to make sure like nobody got in that wasn't supposed to get in. Okay, not that big of a deal. Okay, like we can do that. Okay, even these people. Okay, maybe we still be successful. Then by the time we got in the theater, our mission was changed again. I was deployed with Alpha Company, 579th Combat Engineer Battalion, and they waved their magic wand and said, poof, you're all provisional infantry now, and you're actually going to be part of this new group called Task Force Tacoma, and you're going to report to 1st Infantry Division, and it's going to be your job to action on operational intelligence, kick in the doors, and chase down the bad guys. And I couldn't believe it. It was like, part of me, I was like, well, this is what I joined the Army to do. So like part of me was like, okay, but then the other 99% of me was like, this is catastrophic. So if you've ever been into a forward base in combat in early 2004, there's not a lot of technology. There was a internet cafe with a few computers that you can kind of connect to the internet on sometimes. And there were some phones that if you're lucky enough to get a signal, you can call. Everyone was calling their friends and family. I was calling everyone I knew, and I'm not proud of this, but it's what happened. You know, like we do that sometimes, like try to make ourselves look good. Well, like, well, I would have done this. No, I'm not proud at all of what I did, but it is what I did. I called everyone I knew from Fort Bragg who was still on active duty and emailed everyone I knew saying, get me out of here. And I was a leader. To get me out of this place, man. I didn't want to go home. I just wanted to be attached to their unit, like to someone who had their stuff together. I didn't want to be here. I thought I was going to die. Like, I knew I was going to die. Like, it wasn't going to be good. Like, we weren't trained, we weren't ready, and now somehow this happened, and I was trying desperately to get out of it, but every call and every email went unanswered. And then the ridiculous operational tempo started to ensue. 2 and 3 combat missions every day. And as one might expect, we started losing people. Really good people. You know, they might not have been the best soldiers in the world, but they were like friends. And then, as we need to do, all of us, in situations like that, when we lose people, is we need to honor their memory and try to do better. And we tried. And the learning curve was steep. But there's something incredible about goals. You know, I talked about a little earlier about my first goal and having achieved it, but like when the goal is to be an efficient, combat-capable force, like doing the job that you've been trained to do and are expected to do, and your goal is to do that at some level of proficiency, but then the consequence of not meeting your goal is that your best friends die. The amount of human transformation in those moments is miraculous. You know, I watched a group of these people, like the Beverly Hillbillies, become one of the most elite, efficient fighting forces on the entire planet that I ever had the privilege of serving with, let alone having the opportunity to lead. Like, it was like night and day, the transformation that happened when the stakes were that high. And now, like, I work with organizations all the time dealing with human performance and human potential and stuff. I'm like, well, maybe the work is in goal setting. Yeah, I don't know. But the reality is that miracles are possible with human beings. Because, I mean, I saw it firsthand, not with one, but with a whole company, about 100 people. Just complete transformation, night to day. And then as we got better and better and more skilled, the level and complexity of the missions that we were getting assigned were going higher and higher, and we worked with special operations forces. I mean, we weren't special forces. Like, listen, a lot of military people do that too. Like, I was this and I was that. No, we were a bunch of military, like Army National Guard guys that became infantry, and we had a job to do, and we did it as good as we can. But we did get to be pretty good at those missions, and then we did get assigned missions of greater complexity and consequence. And then I'll never forget, the Battle of Fallujah started on November 7th, 2004. Now, I did not go to Fallujah. The reason I remember, so that was a Marine Corps effort. So I was Army, and November 7th, this effort started, but I remember the date because I had a medic named Sergeant Goutreau. Sergeant Goutreau was like, he was an amazing medic. He was a horrible soldier, but he was an amazing medic. See, like, there's a saying in the military, and it's pretty much the same through all the branches. It's like, if you have a really bad soldier in garrison, sometimes they're usually an amazing soldier in combat. And sometimes the most amazing soldiers in combat aren't the best in garrison, meaning like at home when it's peacetime. And then you have the people in the middle that are great both places, which is obviously best case scenario. Sergeant G was the really good in combat, not good in garrison. But he was so good at his job. It was no surprise the Marine Corps snatched him up. See, Sergeant G, like, he was the guy in the middle of the night operation. Now, not something super significant, like we were doing Overwatch for a mission, be 2 o'clock in the morning. There's a thing called noise discipline in the military and light discipline. Noise discipline meaning it's the middle of the night and it's really quiet outside. You don't make a bunch of noise, because if you do, the enemy knows where to put the bullets. Kind of common sense. Same with light. If you have a light, a white light, or if you're starting a fire or lighting something on fire, Like, yeah, the enemy can see that. They know the bullet. Get bad stuff. Sergeant G would be the guy in the Overwatch operation lighting a cigarette. Man, like, man, this is stupid stuff. I can't believe we're out here in the middle of the night. This is dumb. I could be at home. You know, he's puffing and we're talking politics. And I'm like, Sergeant G, like, you got to keep it down. Man, there ain't nobody out here. Nobody cares. We're here. It was just that guy. But if things got real, Sergeant G could shoot, move, communicate, keep us patched up in the fight. Nobody was better than he was. So when they snatched him up, kind of like, okay, figured, but we needed to replace him a medic. And so I was deployed from the California National Guard. So everybody that we were being replaced from were either straight out of basic training on active duty or from somewhere else in California. And we got this dude named Dan Smee. And I'll never forget meeting Dan because his helmet was cocked back on his head, which is the first no-go, right? Like not wearing his helmet correctly. And his hair was coming out of his helmet, like just all down his face like this. And he was like, Sergeant Nevins, yeah, it was so great to meet you, bro. I'm like, oh my God, I think you're high right now. What is this? This is not, it's not okay. But turns out like he was likable. People liked him. We went on a few missions together and he seemed like together enough and it was great. And then 2 days later, November 9th, we got intelligence that some of the insurgency was leaving Fallujah to come attack our area of operations, LSA Anaconda or Balad Air Base. So like the most professional army in the world, we drew up a battle plan. We said we're going to take the fight to the enemy. We practiced. We prepared. We rehearsed for every possible contingency, like literally night and day from where we started to where we were. And this mission was a little more critical, had a little more weight to it for me because I was leading this operation. It was normally my boss, my platoon, so I was the first squad leader of 3rd Platoon. My boss is a guy named Sergeant Mike Adolini, Sergeant First Class Mike Adolini, and he was my platoon sergeant, my boss. And if Mike was here right now, like sitting with you guys, he would not be the smartest guy in the room. He wouldn't be the most charismatic guy in the room. He wouldn't be the most liked or likable guy in the room. But I don't even know you, and I can say this. If Mike Adolini were in this room, he'd be the hardest working human being in this room. I've never met anyone else with the work ethic and discipline of Mike Adolini. And so he couldn't be on this operation, not for any fault of his own. See, he had been fighting with a 2-inch protruding abdominal hernia for a couple months before we found out about it. We were like, Mike, you got to get that fixed. So he finally got surgery scheduled for November 10th, the day of this operation, weeks before the actual intelligence came out. And since I was next in command, it was my operation. I felt like we got everything right in preparation. I went to bed, barely slept. And I woke up the next morning on November 10th, probably at 2 a.m., but 3 a.m. start time because we had a 4 o'clock time to, time to leave, mission time. So I had to do my pre-combat checks with my people, make sure they have all their bullets and water and food and everything they need so we'd be successful in this 72-hour dismounted counterinsurgent operation we were about to go on. And I remember we had a 6-vehicle convoy, and I remember going to the last vehicle all the way to the first. Now I'm a high fiver. Like I don't do the knuckle thing and the snail and I learned French fries today. I don't know that, but Joanne told me that one. Yeah, I don't do that. I'm a high fiver. Right, old school. I like it like that. And so one by one, when I do my pre-combat checks and they're good to go, I high five them. They get in their truck. High five. They get in their truck. And one by one, I go all the way to the lead vehicle, my vehicle, and I go to tap my driver, a guy named Smitty. And I go to Smitty, but it's not Smitty. Turns around and it's Mike, my boss. It's going to drive. And like for a platoon sergeant to drive a vehicle, it doesn't really happen like that. So like it'd be like the CEO answering the phone. Like it just doesn't really go down. So I was like, Mike, what are you doing here? And he did that thing that people do when they're about to tell you something they shouldn't have done. And he pulled me over to the side. And he was like, hey, so I got up early this morning and went and found Smitty. And I remember I sat on his chest and I told him how sick he was. And if he didn't agree with how sick he was, I was going to make him real sick. So obviously he was too sick to come today, so I volunteered to drive. See, he was just that guy. He just couldn't put his people in harm's way without him being involved in something. So I just high-fived Mike. There's nothing else for me to do. I got in the vehicle and we left the main gates of LSA Anaconda at exactly 0400 hours, right on time. And remember, we left the main gates of LSA Anaconda. We took a right on a well-traveled paved road that we called Mount Dover. No idea what the real name is. Then we took an almost immediate left on a not so well-traveled dirt road en route to what was supposed to be our dismount site, maybe 7 kilometers down the road. And then I remember it was pitch black outside. Like the darkest dark I've ever seen. There was low-hanging cloud cover, so you couldn't see the moon or the stars, and it was eerily silent. The only thing I remember hearing was the familiar 6.2-liter Cummins diesel engine in my Humvee as we bounced carefully down this pitiful road in silence and in darkness. And remember hearing that sound and being in prayer, and then boom! The silence was destroyed by the deafening blast that sent my 18,000-pound vehicle about 6 feet in the air in a ball of fire. Remember being in that prayer, and when the explosion happened, I could feel and hear the truck basically disintegrate around my body, and I really didn't know what was happening, but I realized when I opened my eyes, and I might have been knocked out for a couple of seconds, that I had been ejected from the vehicle. My legs remained caught in the twisted and burning metal that used to be the floorboard and undercarriage of the truck. And I remember I really couldn't see. I had this sickening knot in my stomach. My face felt hot. My ears were ringing. I had a taste of blood in my mouth, and I was confused. And I really couldn't see. My vision was blurry, but there was also this huge cloud of dust from the silty-like dirt that was all throughout the theater. It was descending like this just noxious cloud. And there was a little bit of light now, though, because the fire from the blast, the lingering fire, started to like catch parts of my vehicle on fire. And I remember trying to make out shapes and objects, and the first thing I could see as the dust started to descend as I looked forward to the driver's compartment of the vehicle was, I noticed immediately that Sergeant First Class Mike Iolini had made the ultimate sacrifice. Painfully obvious. And I remember laying back in that silty-like dirt, watching through blurred eyes as my team moved with tactical proficiency, securing the perimeter, doing everything that they were supposed to do. And I'm supposed to be the guy telling them what to do, yet I was saying nothing, and they're doing everything right. Like training actually working. Like trust and faith. And they were getting it done without me. And then I realized that I had some time, so I better check myself out. So like we're all trained, I started with my head, and my helmet came apart in 2 pieces in my hand. And that wasn't the best start, but I was conscious, and that's a good thing. And I realized, like everything in the government, my helmet was made by the lowest bidder, so it's just been a defect. And then I went on to check myself. My arms, I started to get feeling back in my hands, my torso. When I reached up for my legs, they were still stuck in my vehicle. When I reached up, that's when I felt it. The unmistakable arterial blood spurt with every beat of my heart. And I knew that I was going to die. Started to make my peace with God. I was saying goodbye to my wife and my 10-year-old daughter. I was giving up. And losing what seemed like all of my blood in this miserable place on the planet. And you know how they say when you're about to die, your life flashes before your eyes? You've heard that before, yeah? Well, that wasn't my experience, actually. For me, it was more like watching a slideshow of things I'd left undone, like left unaccomplished. And I couldn't tell you today what any of them were. They all since like escaped my memory. I could have probably told you the day after or something, but the last one I remember. It's my little girl. But not 10, she was all grown up. Dressed in white, head to toe. And walking down the aisle without her dad. that I just shot up. I was like, dang, I'm alive. I'm alive. I better do something to keep it that way. So I just reached my hand into the wound in my thigh, almost up to my wrist, and attempt to like find the artery to stop the bleeding. I thought it was gonna be like MacGyver and just pinch it off. And be like, I got it. Rub some dirt on it. Just not how it went down though. I just pressed against a piece of shrapnel that was still lodged in my femur, and I prayed that it would just buy enough time for the medic to arrive. Sergeant G can fix anything. It's like I blinked my eyes. There was fucking Dan Smee with his hair just coming out. Totally lying to me. Sergeant Nevins, you're going to be all right. It's like I blinked my eyes and I had a tourniquet on my leg. I blinked again, I had an IV in my arm. And I blinked again and my whole team, my family was right there putting themselves in harm's way to remove my legs from that vehicle that was still on fire. It's like I blinked again and I was on the stretcher and then in the helicopter and then right back to the combat surgical hospital that was right next to the main gates of LSA Anaconda that I had just left maybe 10 minutes before. I remember going off the bird and into surgery, and they stuck my IV with happy juice, and I'm going in, and I don't really remember much until waking up from that surgery in the recovery section of the tent. And there was a combat nurse's face right in mine, and I'll never know her name, but I'll never forget her face or what she said to me. She said, Sergeant Nevins, you're a very lucky man. We managed to repair your femoral artery. We had to take your left leg below the knee. We managed to save your right one for now, but you'll probably lose that one too. And she was right. After ultimately 21 months in the hospital, another year of recovery, I ultimately took my right one below the knee as well. You're a very lucky man. And then right about the time that pity party was going to set in, because I was a competitive runner. Running is what brought my wife and I together. That was our thing that we did. Like I used to define myself on all the physical things that I could do. Like that's how I was a man. Like I was leading men in combat. I was 8 feet tall and bulletproof. I was unmessable with. Like, I mean, like that was it. And now I'm broken and useless laying in this hospital bed. She just told me that my life is over basically. And then I looked against the wall of the tent, and there was my whole team waiting for me to wake up. So I shrugged off the pity party, and they all came over, and the first, like, we told horribly inappropriate jokes. A bit bad, like I can't say them in public. I think I made a joke too. It's okay for general audiences about returning the roller skates I got for Christmas, and I didn't get roller skates for Christmas, but we get really great pain medicine. So thank you, taxpayers. Good job. And we told stories. We talked about Mike. See, I wear this bracelet every day for Mike. It's a memorial bracelet. You've probably seen them before. It says, Sergeant First Class Michael C. Annalini, Task Force Tacoma, 10 November 2004, Balad, Iraq. We wear these as memorials for our friends who can no longer be here. But I wear this as a reminder, actually, for two really important things. The first is to work hard, like Mike. Because a goal without hard work is just a wish. And wishes don't do anything for anyone. I mean, yeah, there's Make-A-Wish and all. Yeah, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about who I used to be, to say, oh, I'm going to do that, and yeah, I'll be there for you, and yeah, count on me to help, and all the things, and then not do the work to make those goals a reality. Yeah, like I don't want to be like that. This reminds me that if I have a goal, if there's something I want to accomplish and something I want to do, I better be ready to do all the work it takes to make it real. All of it. To live with integrity, those values that I learned in uniform, like actually put it into translation in my life. And this bracelet reminds me to live. But not just be alive, Like live in a way that's in integrity and alignment with who I want to be in the world. Like who, like not like go through default a role that I play and like who I'm supposed to be in certain situations or what's expected of me, but actually say, no, like this is who I want to be, and then create my life in accordance to that. The decisions that I make about how I show up and where I show up as a parent, as a leader, the yoga teacher, speaker, being right here on purpose. Like on purpose. You know, after I got hurt and I went through all that at the hospital, I went straight, fell asleep after, you know, we talked about Mike and we shed some tears. And I woke up the next morning at Lewiston Regional Medical Center in Germany. I'd spent the next 7 days there with surgery every day, sometimes twice a day. And I'd be in and out of my anesthetic fog, like in and out. So I didn't have any time to talk to people. I had what looked like piano wire holding my thighs together. One leg was gone. The other leg had rods and pins holding it together. I mean, I didn't look good at all. And I'm flat on my back, feeling broken, feeling useless, and just no one to talk to because they're busy saving lives. I'd usually be sitting in a pool of my own blood waiting for a dressing change. That's not a knock on them. It's just talk about how busy the hospital was. And I got to think about what that nurse is. I lost one leg and probably the other. What can a guy with no legs do? In my mind, it was nothing. I mean, I've never felt more useless, more broken, with nothing left to contribute, and yet all my guys were still fighting the fight. Like I had abandoned them. Like I started to think about Mike, and I would get mad. Why did the good ones have to go? Why did he volunteer to try it? And then I got mad at Mike because I thought he got the better deal. I didn't want to be there. Not in pain, not feeling like that. And after 7 days, I finally got my ride to Walter Reed Army Medical Center in the back of a C-130. Or it was actually, so it was a C-17. And it was a miserable flight, miserable landing, miserable transfer to the ambulance, miserable welcome to Walter Reed surgery. And I woke up the next morning on Ward 57, the severely injured orthopedic ward at Walter Reed, and I got to meet my nurse, finally the first human being I got to talk to. Her name was Erica. She was amazing. She was just beautiful inside and out. I got to propose to her like 3 times. I mean, I was married, but see, she had pain medicine. She was like a 10. Like, whoa. Like, oh, you're an angel. You know, it was just like that. And no, I just, so much like connect, first person I got to connect with, like really connect with. And that just, she still has a very special place in my heart. And then I remember her saying that, you know, my wife was on her way from California and it was supposed to be good news, but it really wasn't. I didn't want to see her. It's more that I didn't want her to see me. Not like that. Especially I felt like part of me, I was living into what she didn't want to happen, just further validating that she never should have married me. Like I wasn't looking forward to it at all. And then she said, hey, there's some people here that I want you to meet. I just had a couple bites of lunch, and in comes 2 of the founders of an organization called Wounded Warrior Project. And they had a backpack full of comfort items. It was a really low-grade nylon backpack, 1 zip, 1 color heat transfer. I mean, not a good product at all. So bad. And it had this logo on it, 1 warrior carrying another off the battlefield. And I instantly identified with the logo because I was just the guy being carried off the battlefield. And inside, where everything that I didn't know that I needed, there were calling cards. Who remembers calling cards? To call home? Yeah, young people, the long distance used to be very expensive. People that loved you gave you money to call them with. A deck of playing cards, CD players, CDs, notes from grateful Americans saying thank you for your service. There were socks in there, that it didn't really need. But it made really great hand puppets for when the pain medicine kicked in, you know what I mean? And actually, I want to just pause for a second. I want to acknowledge, like, this is what I want you guys to do specifically here at Geiger to understand. That backpack changed my whole life. I mean, it was the worst day of my life, worst week of my life. And then some schlep out there went to my buddy that started Wounded Warrior Project and sold him a bunch of backpacks and put the logo on it. And that backpack changed everything for me. It's the most significant gift I've ever received or probably ever will receive. And I know for you all here, like, you all do different things inside of this organization. And you might feel like, well, like what I do, like if I'm in accounting, I'm just numbers, or if I'm this, whatever it is that you do, like it's like if you ever feel for a minute like your job or what you're doing doesn't add impact to people's lives, you need to just stop and recognize that every single day what you do is changing and saving lives in a lot of ways. You don't know when that promo item gets into the hands of someone, it could change their whole life. Maybe just their day. And maybe they're a better parent that day. Maybe they're a better employee that day. Maybe they're a better boss that day. Maybe they have a smile that day that makes someone else smile, and that changes someone else's life. Like, you don't know. But I'm here to tell you that no matter what your role is in this organization, it's a very near and dear part of my life. Now, I don't know if it was Geiger that I should do some research. I probably could find out now, like who sold those backpacks. But that logo that was put on it is the whole reason I even entertained talking to those folks. And that organization was at my hospital bedside every day of my recovery, helping me prove that my disability didn't define me, but that I get to define what the rest of my life was going to be like. And I went on to work for that organization. And I learned a lot of things that from 2008, so it's doubled by now, but I can't say it because the info is not validated. So from 2008, 400,000 people live with the invisible wounds of war, PTSD. 320,000 live with a traumatic brain injury, and I identify with that because I have one. It's a great excuse for forgetting birthdays. It's much better now than it was 14 years ago, but still got it. It's called the silver lining. 30,000+, almost 32,000 physically wounded, have to put on 2 prosthetic legs every day. I identify with that. But then there was the 22 veterans a day that take their own life that I didn't identify with. Because I was like, I didn't understand. I didn't know how do they do that? Was it Darwinism? I didn't know. Until it started to be my friends. And then people that I knew. And then 5 years ago, I had my 36th surgery. It was on my right leg. What was left of my leg. So I couldn't wear my right leg as part of my recovery. So I went to Walter Reed, had my surgery by the best surgeons on the planet, came home, was hopping around on crutches and 1 prosthetic leg. My 10-year-old, now 18 and in the Army herself. I had a 3-year-old daughter from my marriage. That marriage ultimately was a casualty of the war. So we shared custody, and I couldn't chase around the 3-year-old on 2 crutches and 1 prosthetic leg. I couldn't answer my email or call my team, thanks to FMLA, HR people. Love you. Just kidding. And the invisible wounds of war are a real thing. And what I had to cope with the invisible wounds of war were all physical. Climb Kilimanjaro, go hiking, ride an unadapted road bike all over the country, play golf, got to be a single-digit handicap in golf. Like all these physical things that fueled ego also kept my invisible wounds at bay. Like I didn't suffer because I always had something to do, but now I didn't have anything to do, so I was suffering. The thoughts, like what I had to do, what I had to see, like all those things coming in, they were just invasive and intrusive in my life, and I couldn't sleep. And when I would sleep, I'd wake up with nightmares, and I'd take a handful of Benadryl and chase it down with a few shots of whiskey, trying to get back to sleep and hoping I wouldn't wake up. And I wasn't suicidal, but for the first time ever, I saw it happen. I understood how that evolution, how that process happened, and I knew I needed some help. But I didn't want to call Wounded Warrior Project because I thought they'd like send in. I'd worked for the organization for over 7 years. Like I thought they'd send helicopters and SWAT team and whisk me off to some underground treatment facility somewhere. It was not that bad. So I called a friend of mine. I told her everything that was happening. I was like pouring my heart out to another human being, and then she listened to everything, and she said, "Dan, you need some yoga in your life." I was like, "That's the dumbest thing you've ever said in your whole life." I'm like, "I can't believe I just poured my heart out to you, and you're going to talk some bull stuff about yoga?" Like, no. And she said, "Well, what about meditation?" And I was like, "Well, I tried before, and I'm sorry. Like, I know, like, Steve Jobs is cool. He wrote a book about it. Who doesn't love Gandhi, right? Like, I didn't know how, and I failed at meditation, so I told her I was no good at it. But then she taught me actually how to meditate. That it was all about being present to everything happening, and not like vacant or absent from life. Be out into what's happening out of thought. And then I got it and started to have real success. And then I could fall asleep better, and no more Benadryl, no more booze, and I started to control my life, and I was so thankful and appreciative. I got better sleep, and I just felt like a better person, and I got my leg back, and I could walk, and I could go back to work. And I remember calling her, made this big mistake. I called her to say thank you. And then I got what every good friend would do in the other end of the line. "Oh, so this weird hippie bullcrap like actually worked for you, huh?" "Yes, it did. I think you owe me some yoga." And I couldn't figure out how to not do it. So I agreed to 3 private lessons. With private, not with people. Anybody practice yoga in here? Yeah, not you weirdos. I didn't want to be with you weirdos. You know? And just one person, just her and I. Like, that's it. Like, I didn't want any weirdos around trying to convert me to some weird yoga religion or all the things that I grew up with, all the stereotypes, hippie, tree hugger, granola, all that I just had. I had it from youth. That I carried with me like a turtle shell full of baggage, right? And I just didn't want any part of it. So she, I agreed to 3 private lessons. And I remember I went to I walked into Lululemon because I'm all or nothing type of guy. Walked into Lululemon, man card jumped out of my wallet, started ripping itself up. Refinanced my house, bought a pair of shorts and a shirt. Bought a yoga mat, went to a yoga studio, go in, like I'm just completely like hoping nobody sees me, roll out my yoga mat. She's teaching me poses and like some Sanskrit words, which is just dead language. I'm like, "Why are you speaking terrorist to me?" Right? It's just me, all this way of thinking, it's all happening. And she's I'm on 2 prosthetic legs, and one of them just had surgery. I'm healed, but I'm doing these poses. She's teaching me Warrior One, and I'm moving all over the place, and she's saying, and it's painful, and it's excessively hot in the room. I'm like, "Why is it so hot?" I'm just angry, and she's saying stupid things like root down to rise up. I'm like, "What does that even mean?" And she's like, "Press your feet into the ground. Say feet one more time. Say one more time. And watch what happens to you with this block." I'm gonna do it right. Like I'm it was, I'm hot. It's just a mess. And at the end of the hour, I was so happy it was over. I was going home, like it's so happy. Okay, I tried it, failed miserably. Okay, I'm done. I get home, doing my things, my phone rings. It's Anna, my teacher, trying to schedule the next lesson. And then right about the time I was going to tell her exactly what to do with that lesson, I remembered that I committed to 3. And a commitment is a commitment, period. So I scheduled like 2 weeks later, give me some time to heal, get my manhood back in check. And I went in, and I'd love to say it just changed my life, but I went in and it was the same miserable experience. I'm like hot and I'm sweaty, and she's root down to rise up, and I'm like, I'm so mad, and just I got so frustrated. I said, can I just try this with my legs off? And her eyes popped open. Her eyes were saying, no, you sure can't. What am I going to tell you to do with your feet? But her mouth said, yeah, let's try it. And so this is what you got to get, is that nobody got to see me with my legs off. They were my best physical feature. And I know right now you're doing that thing, like, what's my best feature? And I know you know what it is. Your eyes, your smile, your legs, whatever it is. Well, mine was always my legs, because I was a little kid, but my legs were powerful. I could throw 100 pounds on my back and run for 20 miles. Like, I could do this. And then when they were blown off, like, I had a lot of grief and loss and shame that I had to deal with, or that I didn't deal with, actually, because I got these new prosthetic legs. And prosthetic legs were cool because it got to mask, it got to cover up how everything atrophied and shriveled away, and what was once like bronze, golden, godlike legs were just shriveled up and scarred and thin and gone and completely changed. Even what was left of my legs, everything changed. And then I got to, though, ride unadapted road bikes and go faster and further than people with their legs, or climb Mount Kilimanjaro, or play golf. I've actually never lost a golf game, because even if you shoot lower than me, what are you going to brag that you beat a guy in the legs? You know, like those things, right? Like that. And kids thought they're cool. Like, kids love prosthetic. Like, as a matter of fact, parents all the time try to stop their kids. Kids are like curious, and parents are like, no, don't do that. Don't be that parent. Let the kids be curious. Also, don't march your kids over and like, tell them your story. No, don't do that either. Let them be curious. Matter of fact, when I see a kid get curious, I instantly just walk right up and go, they're cool, right? And they're like, yeah. What happened? I didn't eat my vegetables. And then boom. And the mom's like, yes. I'm like, call me. So no, so I'm on my yoga mat, throw my legs off to the side, and I'm getting down on my knees. And Anna is behind me looking at me. She's been teaching about a year at this point, and she's probably wondering, what am I going to tell him to do with his legs or his feet? But I'm an all or nothing guy, like I said, so I'm like, I'm going to do warrior one. I'm going to do this pose, warrior one. So I spread my legs apart and I press my knees down. I'm like, okay, what is that stupid stuff she keeps saying? Root down to rise up. What does that mean? So I just imagine roots growing down from my legs into the ground. And pause, caveat, I'm a dude. Shoot guns, I eat meat. Very careful when I get my meat. But like, I shoot guns, I eat meat. Like, I wouldn't identify as hippie, granola cruncher, tree. I love trees. I'll hug them all day. But like, you know, all those negative things, those names that I had are still rattling around. That's not me. I'm just a regular dude. But I'm imagining roots growing down from my legs, and then she could root down to rise up. And when I reached my arms over my head, I got a powerful and very real, like actual, not a metaphor, not an exaggeration, not some sort of thing. No, a very real, palpable surge of energy from the earth into my body that lit me up from the inside out. My hands flew up over my head. I felt 8 feet tall and bulletproof again, like there was nothing in my way. I felt complete and whole. It's like the earth was saying, Dan, where have you been for the last 10 years, floating above it on your prosthetics, not even connected to the thing that we're all, like, I'm on the floor, so are you, that we're connected physically by this thing that we all stand on and completely take for granted. I'd realized that I'd been lacking that connection for a decade. But that connection was gone everywhere in my life. I say my marriage was a casualty of the war. No, my marriage was a casualty of connection. And then I went to work, putting connection back in all areas of my life. And then everything got better. And then I went, well, actually, before all that, I went to my 3rd yoga class. And by the end of that one, I was signed up in teacher training. And I just knew that there was more for me. You'll hear the rest of that story at yoga today if you go, which you're all going to come. I don't know if you're breaking a record, I think. But that showed me that there was so much more that I hadn't been paying attention to. And then when I started paying attention on where connection was missing in my life and putting that back in, everything got better. I was a better dad, a better peer, a better boss, a better human being. Like, I could tell you all the science behind it about how you make better decisions, how you make faster decisions, how you sleep better and reduce the aging process, and like all things in yoga, but that's not what I'm here to do. I'm here to tell you that life is worth slowing down just a little and connecting with the people around you. Because look, nobody promised that life is easy. Life is, in fact, not easy at all. And I know, like, we all have jobs to do and people and lives, but listen, like, at the end of the day, it's all worth it. How you show up in the things that you choose to do and how, like, actually choosing and making choices to fulfill who it is you want to be. Like, the person in your chair right now wearing your clothes, like that person, like who you actually want to be, if you can just be the best version of yourself by maybe pausing and connecting with someone, maybe yourself. That's what's so great about yoga and meditation is it is taking a physical look inward and just being present as a human being and stop all the thinking and just give yourself a break. Just a break from the rat race that happens up here about what people think about you and your performance and all the things that cripple us. And just I'm going to tell you one quick exercise. I did it in the first group, but I'm going to share this with you. My yoga teacher taught me this thing. He said, find your feet, find your life. And I was like, I'm screwed. But here's what he meant. So everybody put your feet on the floor. Just put your feet on the floor. Press your feet down. Close your eyes. Press your feet down into the floor. And really experience your feet touching through your shoes and down into the floor. Lengthen your spine, pull your shoulders back over your hips. Take a deep breath in, fill up your lungs. Exhale, let it out. Notice all the air escaping your lungs till it's all the way empty. Keep your feet pressed. Inhale, fill your lungs all the way up. Notice your lungs expand in your rib cage. Rib cage presses out. Hold it. Exhale, let it all go. Notice all the air escape. One more time, take a deep breath in, fill up, expand. Yeah, notice it. Notice your actual lungs moving in physical space. Exhale, diaphragm pushes up, air escapes, open your eyes. Yeah, just that quick little break. When things start to get stressful, when things start to go sideways, find your feet, find your life. Don't make any decisions until you've done that little thing when you're feeling under stress. That's a sidebar of what I wanted to talk to you about, but it just came up naturally, and I wanted to share that with you as a tool that's helped me through so many near career ending, near relationship ending instances. Really find your feet, find your life. Remember nothing else. Remember that. And I'll say this, that it's absolutely my greatest honor to have served wearing the uniform of our country. And I wouldn't trade a single day, a single moment of any of it. And it's also my greatest honor to continue to have found a way to serve, albeit in a completely different uniform. Through my work with Wounded Warrior Project and my work in my little small nonprofit that I started called Warrior Spirit Retreat, where I use yoga, mindfulness, and meditation to help heal the invisible wounds of war, using mindful recreational therapy, golf, fly fishing, and horsemanship. And like that's, I mean, how I got introduced here was through Sweden as a base camp ambassador. They give me $100,000 a year for my nonprofit. I'm forever grateful and for the introduction to Geiger. And I gotta tell you this, so I've been to a lot of places, large companies, small companies, medium-sized companies. The commitment that this organization has to you in your health and your wellness, from stretching posters that I saw out in the distribution center, to the fact that you have a gym and a yoga room, like you gotta know, if you've never been anywhere else or don't know any better, stop looking. Like you are at the right place. Like this organization, I'm blown away. I'm very impressed by the commitment to your health, the fact that they allowed me to come in and share this story with you. Because if you, like, you got to know that what you do makes a huge difference. A backpack, a really bad one, by the way, changed everything for me. So it's my honor to have served and found a way to continue to serve. Thank you for who you are and what you do. Thanks.